No one in that village would have guessed the most dangerous man around walked with 2 bamboo crutches, his back bent and his clothes tattered by time. But that day, standing before 3 taekwondo fighters, he pulled off the impossible and changed that place's story in a way nobody saw coming. The old stone village, tucked between misty hills out in Oaxaca's interior, felt frozen in time. Little adobe and wooden houses creaked in the wind, and people moved quietly, following rules no one ever spoke aloud. Order there wasn't enforced by laws, but by honor, tradition, and lately, by fear. Fear of the bare-chested men who'd rolled in just days before. Disciplined, cold, unbeatable, warriors forged from pain and pride. They hadn't come to make peace, they'd come to show force. In the center of town, they'd strung up a makeshift ring of ropes and bamboo. That was where the students of Master Jinsu Han, the region's most feared taekwondo champion, were meant to show off. People crowded the narrow streets to watch, laughter bouncing off the old rooftops. And then he showed up, a ragged man leaning on wooden crutches, face worn and hollow-eyed, as if he carried more past than strength. They only called him the cripple. He slept beneath the church awnings and took whatever scraps the market stalls tossed away. No one knew his real name. Some swore he'd once been a beggar. Others swore they'd seen him fight back when Chinese monks still wandered the mountains teaching kung fu. But now, stooped and limping, he looked like just another soul the world had forgotten. The fighters laughed when he shuffled up. They pointed, taunted, cracked jokes. Young, ripped, skin inked with tigers, eagles, and victory marks. One of them sneered, "Hey, cripple, you gonna fight with those crutches or you here for spare change?" The crowd snickered, half nervous. The cripple didn't answer. He lifted his head and looked at the ring like someone staring at an old altar. In that moment, the laughter started to fade. There was something in his eyes, something none of them understood until it was too late. From inside the circle, Han crossed his arms and barked, his voice like steel. "This place is sacred to warriors. Cripples don't belong here." He set one crutch on the ground, sighed, and with a slight smile answered, "Long ago, Master, the sacred and the profane shared the same body." The laughter stopped. The first disciple lunged forward, laughing even louder. "Then come on, crutch sage, show us what you got." The cripple let go of one crutch and balanced on the other. Silence spread. The youngster launched a quick kick aimed at his chest. But the instant the foot rose, the cripple twisted with impossible lightness, slipping aside, as if the wind itself had helped him. With an elbow's flick, he struck just under the opponent's armpit. It landed clean. The disciple crumpled, bewildered. The laughs died. Han frowned, unbelieving. The second warrior flew into a rage, roaring like an animal. He came at him with fists and kicks, but the cripple seemed to float through the attacks, evading by mere millimeters. Every move looked like an off-balance dance, and with each spin there came a sharp sound, the sound of a body hitting the ground. When the second disciple dropped, the crowd held its breath. The third, Han himself, the strongest, hesitated. Sweat ran over his tattooed chest. "Who are you?" he ground out. The cripple braced on both crutches again, straightened his spine and said, "I was the one who trained your master's master." Then he tossed the crutches to the ground. The audience took a step back as he took his first unsupported step. The bamboo hit the earth like thunder. The cripple drew a deep breath and blink and moved. Every gesture was the condensed memory of a life of pain turned into art. Han, up on the ring, couldn't believe his eyes. The taekwondo champ who'd mocked him tightened his black belt and climbed down the steps, eyes burning. "If what you say is true, prove it," he muttered. The cripple looked him dead in the eye. "A man's strength is not in his shout, but in the silence he endures." Han lunged and met only air. The cripple spun, his crooked body sweeping in a perfect arc, and with an open palm touched the other man's chest. One strike, that was it. Han staggered and dropped to his knees. The crowd, stunned, went quiet. The cripple bent, picked up a crutch, tucked it back under his arm and said, "Compassion is the last stage of strength." Then he turned away. As he limped out of the village, no one laughed. Not Han, not his men. Only the sound of the crutches echoed between the houses, a perpetual reminder that real power doesn't shout. It waits. San Isidro barely showed up on maps. Lost among dusty hills and dry scrub, it lived on the edge of modern life. Church bells still set the day's rhythms, kids ran barefoot over the stones, and old men met to play dominoes in fig tree shade. But since the foreign fighters arrived, even the bell tones seemed to hesitate. The cripple, now the center of every gaze, remained a mystery. He vanished for 2 days after the fight. Some swore they'd seen him enter a cave at the hill's base. There were stories that ancient spirits lived there. Others claimed supernatural forces or government agents, worried about the scandal, had carted him off. The truth was simpler and sadder. He slept beneath an old stone bridge, surrounded by rats that scurried at night. He tended his wounds himself, wrapping them with rags torn from rice sacks. He wasn't used to attention or admiration. Every look stirred memories he'd rather bury. Slowly, faces appeared. First was Mateo, an 8-year-old, the tailor's son, who brought him a scrap of bread and a little bottle of lime water. "You're a superhero, right?" the kid asked, eyes bright. The cripple let out a laugh years hadn't touched his face. "I'm no more than someone who knows how to fall and get up again, just like you, little squirt." Then Senora Dolores from the corner shop left a basket of hot food and slipped away without a word. Father Tomas sought him out in the sacristy, offering shelter and silence. Meanwhile, the rest of the village lived tense days. The Iron Dragon Academy hadn't left. On the contrary, they set up at the old abandoned ranch and turned it into a training ground. The remaining disciples rose at dawn, thumped logs, and honed technique with obsession. Han wouldn't accept defeat. In Korea, he'd been known as the smiling tiger, calm outside, venom inside. He sent letters to other masters, asked for reinforcements, and began to suspect the cripple wasn't just a drunk, an idea that made him furious. "Weakness is the lie of those who fear their own power," he told his students, "and I don't tolerate lies." A new figure also appeared, Lucia, the village's young master, granddaughter of an old Val Tudo fighter who died under shady circumstances years ago. She'd come back to San Isidro to care for her sick mother, but the cripple stirred something in her. Memories, rumors, and an old photo showing a man who looked like him smiling beside her grandfather. She started watching him from afar, studying his movements, trying to decode that strange style. When she finally approached, it wasn't to ask questions, but to challenge. "If you're staying here, you'll teach me what you know," she said. The cripple looked surprised, but he didn't see arrogance in her eyes, only pure determination. "And if I don't want to?" he asked, serious. "Then get out before what's coming swallows everyone." She said it like a command. He sighed. From that day on, they trained in secret behind the little schoolhouse, among trees and ruins. It wasn't an academy, it was survival. She fell, he made her get up. She missed, he made her repeat it. The cripple didn't teach techniques, he taught instinct. But rumors spread. The academy called a tournament. This time the prize wasn't just respect, it was total control of the village. Stakes were high, and Han relied on fear as his sharpest weapon. San Isidro was about to become a quiet battlefield, and in the shadows, an ex-vagrant and a young master prepared, not for glory, but to stop fear from winning again. The official announcement came one Saturday morning through loudspeakers hung from the plaza posts. Han's voice was steady. "In 7 days, the Iron Dragon Academy will hold the Tournament of Honor. Anyone who wants to protect this village, come forward. Those who refuse, accept the consequences." The echo rolled down the streets like thunder. It wasn't an invitation, it was a threat. The village split. Some wanted to resist, Others said it was safer to give in. Fear seeped in like weeds through cracks. Shopkeepers closed early, kids stopped playing in the street, and even the priest, once steady, faltered in his prayers. The cripple, meanwhile, stayed calm. He kept training with Lucia, her arms and legs already marked with bruises, but those eyes carrying a new light. She learned fast, as if something in her unlocked. Not just strength, but intuition, reading movement, inner balance. "Don't fight them," the cripple told her. "Fight everything they told you could not be." But time was running out. On the third night after the announcement, he was ambushed. 3 hooded men attacked him near the old mill, armed with clubs and chains. Caught off guard, a blow to the ribs sent him to his knees, and in the dark, something ancient awoke inside him. Like an ancestral reflex, he rolled, grabbed a loose stone, and flung it straight into one attacker's knee. The snap echoed, the man dropped, and the other 2 hesitated. That doubt was enough. 2 moves, 2 neutralized attacks, 3 bodies on the ground. He didn't kill them, but he made it clear he wasn't easy prey. The next day, Lucia confronted him in the woods, face tight, eyes full of questions. "They'll kill you before the tournament," he shrugged as he wrapped his side. "They think they already killed me a long time ago." She tightened her jaw. "Teach me the finishing move, the one you used on the first disciple." He looked at her steady. "That move is only for when you have nothing left to lose." "Then it's time to learn," she answered, resolute. Mornings in San Isidro started early, with the church bells ringing and the smell of fresh coffee drifting up from clay kitchens. The cobbled streets, still damp with the night's mist, filled with slow footsteps, and the sound of kids running between cacti and stones was the first sign that daylight had finally beaten the dark. But ever since the outsiders arrived, even the sunrise seemed unsure of itself. The Iron Dragon Academy had taken over the Morales Ranch, an old crumbling estate up on the hill. The mansion's walls were cracked, its windows boarded up, and next to it stood a massive barn that now served as an improvised dojo. There, Han Jin-Su's students trained like beasts, rain or shine, day and night. They slammed their fists into logs, barked orders in Korean, and fought each other bare-knuckled, no mercy given. Young men from nearby towns started showing up, drawn by the promise of the Tournament of Honor. But they weren't just students. They were soldiers in disguise. Han wasn't looking for pupils. He was building obedience. Inside the village, the air was thick with tension. People walked with their heads down. Shops stayed empty. The elders barely left home. Even Father Thomas, who used to stroll around with his rosary hanging loose, now avoided going out alone at night. The only place that still felt alive was behind the little rural school. A patch of ground hidden by crooked guava trees and tall, whispering grass. That's where Lucia trained. Her body was covered in bruises, her knees scraped raw, her wrists aching. But her eyes were burning with something fierce. The cripple, who she now called Maestro, though he'd never shared his real name, didn't teach like others did. No counting reps, no shouting. He watched, he corrected, he repeated. He trained instinct. He trained silence. He trained reaction. She fell. He made her get up. She missed. He made her try again. If she cried, he made her breathe. "If you can't fight yourself," he'd say, "you'll never fight anyone else." During breaks, Lucia sat under the shade, just watching him. The cripple was a paradox. Quiet but firm. Fragile in body, but solid as stone in presence. Whenever she asked about his past, he'd dodge the question with old stories or long silences that stretched like deserts. Little by little, she began to see it. The man everyone thought was a washed-up drunk possessed a technique centuries old. It was kung fu, but not the kind you saw in movies. It was raw, grounded, lethal, an invisible art that killed without showing teeth. Meanwhile, up at the Morales Ranch, Han was building his army. Among his disciples, 3 stood out. Felipe the Tiger, a taekwondo champ from the north, fast, cocky, all ego and flash. André the Brute, a disgraced MMA fighter kicked out for cheating, and Yong, a Korean student, quiet, sharp as a blade, cold as marble. They were Han's chosen three, trained not like fighters, but like predators. San Isidro's just the first, Han told them. Wherever there's weakness, we build our kingdom. Meanwhile, rumors about the cripple spread like wildfire. Some said he was a runaway master from China, hiding after killing a corrupt general. Others swore he was a spirit reborn to restore balance to the village. But he stayed the same, sleeping under the bridge, speaking little, appearing only to train Lucia. Until one night, Father Thomas slipped up during a quiet moment in the church. His name was Huang Jian, he murmured. At least that's what they called him back when he taught the monks of Teotihuacan. No one could confirm it, but the name spread like wind, Huang Jian. The cripple of San Isidro finally had a shadow of an identity, and the coming tournament hung over the village like an inevitable storm. People spoke in whispers now, avoided eye contact, and crossed the street when members of the Iron Dragon passed by. Han's training had turned nearly militaristic. The ranch no longer looked like a dojo, but a war camp. Shouts, smacks, and the crack of breaking wood echoed deep into the night. Felipe, Andres, and Yong trained until they bled. It wasn't just about technique. Han taught them fear. Breaking the enemy's mind before breaking his body was his art. Destroy belief first, he'd say. A man who still believes can stand up. A man who doubts is already beaten. Meanwhile, behind that little schoolhouse, Lucia was changing. Training with the cripple left marks, bandaged fingers, cuts on her arms, eyes swollen with fatigue. But inside, something vast was awakening. She no longer reacted. She anticipated. Her movements had rhythm now, fluidity. Her body followed a kind of intelligence she hadn't known she possessed. "Don't fight to win," the cripple told her in his raspy voice. "Fight so you don't lose yourself." One afternoon, during a break, Lucia finally asked what everyone else wondered. "Are you going to fight in the tournament?" The cripple stared off toward the horizon. "I'm not who I used to be," he said quietly. "This village doesn't need me anymore. It needs someone new. It needs you." She said nothing. She didn't have to. That same night, 3 posters went up around the plaza, one name on each: Felipe the Tiger, Andres the Axe, Yong the Black Wind, and below, in smaller letters, "Challenge us or obey us." The message couldn't be clearer. The village was now split in two, those who still believed in resistance and those who just wanted to survive. Lucia knew that stepping into that ring wouldn't just be about fighting men. It would mean taking a stand against the system, against domination, against fear itself. One morning at the market, Felipe stopped her. His black belt hung loose around his waist, his smirk sharp as a blade. "Heard you've been playing dojo with some crippled old man," he said. She kept walking. He grabbed her arm. "Careful, girl. You'll get hurt in that tournament. Best quit before someone gets really hurt." Lucia twisted her wrist free, steady eyes locked on his. "See you in the ring," she said flatly. Felipe let out a dry laugh, but there was a flicker of unease in his gaze. She wasn't afraid, and that rattled him. That night, while training alone beneath a flickering street lamp, she heard a dull thud behind her. It was him, the cripple, holding a small wooden box. "You ready?" he asked. Lucia nodded, breathless. He opened it. Inside were 2 old leather wristbands, worn but cared for. "They belonged to my master," he said. "They're not protection, they're memory of who you are and what you must carry." She slipped them on silently. Later that night, Father Tomas was ordered by the academy to bless the tournament ring. He refused. By morning, the church door was smeared in red paint, a Korean symbol meaning shame. The air felt like war. Shops closed early. Young men trained in secret. Kids no longer played outside. And through it all, the cripple watched. Sitting under the oldest fig tree in the village, he saw everything: The signals, the movements, the fake smiles of Han, the eyes of his disciples, the growing silence in the corners of town. They didn't come for San Isidro, he told Lucia one morning. They came for me. You're just the fire they never saw coming. And that's when she understood. The tournament wasn't just about territory. It was personal. The day of the tournament was coming like a freight train with no brakes. And as the tension thickened, new players began to move in the shadows of San Isidro. The first appeared on a heavy, humid morning when Esteban, a retired boxer, and now the owner of the village's old warehouse, knocked on the door of the little rural school. He carried a dusty wooden box filled with worn bandages, old wraps, and a pair of faded gloves. "I'm not fast anymore. Not strong either," he told Lucia. "But I still remember what it means to fall and get back up. If you'll let me, I can help with conditioning." Lucia hesitated, but the cripple nodded once. "Train with those who've lost and survived," he said. "That's the rarest victory of all." From that day on, Esteban joined their sessions, teaching her breathing control, dodging, endurance, not moves from kung fu or taekwondo, but lessons from life itself. Meanwhile, Father Tomas, increasingly pressured by the academy, began slipping messages of courage and freedom into his sermons, knowing full well he was being watched. "Faith doesn't bow to fear," he would say, locking eyes with Han's men, who always sat in the back pews. Faith walked straight through it. One night, as he walked back from the chapel, he was stopped by Yong, the silent Korean fighter. Without saying a word, the young man stepped close, cold eyes fixed, and handed him an envelope. Inside, a single line: "Speak again, and prayer will be all you have left." Father Tomas burned the note right there in front of him, then turned and walked away without a glance back. The pressure was mounting from every side. Doña Dolores, the shopkeeper, began closing early. Word spread that her nephews had been forced to volunteer as sparring partners for Han's men. Others started disappearing for days at a time. Jose the carpenter, Carmen the seamstress, even Manuel the barber. They all came back quiet, eyes down, with no explanations. The village was splitting apart. Some wanted to resist, others just wanted to survive. But there was a third current moving beneath it all. Rumors about Huang Jian, the cripple's real name, had begun to spread beyond San Isidro's dusty borders. One day, a group of strangers arrived, posing as merchants. But a local boy noticed a tattoo on one of their necks, a small insignia belonging to a Chinese mercenary syndicate known for hunting down deserters and rogue masters. The cripple had a past someone still wanted erased. Lucia confronted him the moment she found out. "You're hiding something bigger than San Isidro," she said. He didn't deny it, but he didn't explain either. "If I tell you everything," he said calmly, "you'll start fighting with fear. And fear is exactly what they want." His answer infuriated her, but it also made her realize he was still trying to shield her from dangers she couldn't yet see. Meanwhile, Felipe, the tiger, feeling threatened by the attention Lucia was getting, started provoking her publicly. One afternoon at the market, he challenged Esteban to a friendly spar. He knocked the old man down with a cheap shot, and the crowd laughed nervously. "This is your trainer, Lucia?" he sneered. "A moldy old man." She didn't respond. But that night, she struck the training post so hard her knuckles split open. The cripple only watched. "Anger can burn like fire," he said. "Just don't drink it. Burn with it." The ties between everyone were tightening, weaving into something heavier, darker. The village wasn't just a stage anymore, it was the emotional battleground of a silent war. And time was running out. The night before the tournament, San Isidro felt quieter than it had ever been. The wind that usually whispered between the rooftops was still. The church bells stayed silent. Even the dogs, usually barking at ghosts, didn't make a sound. It was as if the entire village was holding its breath, Lucia didn't train that day. The cripple had insisted she rest. The body wins when the mind stops fighting it, was all he said. But she couldn't sleep. Her hands trembled, her thoughts collided. And then everything changed. In the middle of the night, 3 hooded men broke down the door of the little schoolhouse. They weren't there to steal or destroy. They were there for him, the cripple. Lucia woke to the sound of splintering wood. Still half asleep, she hid behind the kitchen door and caught only flashes of what happened next. The cripple rose slowly, unarmed, and faced the intruders, like he already knew who they were. One of them spoke with a heavy accent. "Han says there'll be no surprises tomorrow." Another added, "It's time to finish what began years ago, Jan." The name Jan cut through the air like a blade. He said nothing. He just let the cane drop and moved. Fast, precise, deadly. The first man went down with a strike to the throat. The second screamed when his knees snapped, silenced by a crushing kick to the chest. The third hesitated. And that was his mistake. Jian disarmed him, took him down, and ended it with a single sharp blow to the temple. But he wasn't untouched. Blood streaked his face. His torn shirt revealed a body mapped with old and new scars. Lucia ran to him. "You knew they'd come, and you didn't say a word." "It wasn't your war," he answered between ragged breaths. She wrapped his arm in torn cloth, hands shaking. "It is now," she said firmly. By sunrise, the whole village had heard the news. Someone had tried to kill the cripple during the night. The rumor spread like wildfire. Han pretended to be shocked. He stood in the plaza and said loud enough for everyone to hear, "If you can't even protect your old men, how do you plan to protect your village?" But behind the smirk, something cracked. The realization that Jian might not be as broken as he'd hoped. The true turning point, however, didn't come from fists. It came from Father Thomas. During morning mass, he stepped down from the pulpit, walked out to the plaza, and faced the crowd. There, in front of everyone, he spoke the words that changed everything. "The man you call the cripple is Huang Jian, master of the Southern Mantis style, disciple of the Shaolin lineage. 20 years ago, he faced Han Jin-su in an underground tournament on the Chinese border, and won." Shock rippled through the crowd. People turned to look at the cripple with new eyes. He wasn't a beggar anymore. He was a legend. Han had lost control of the story. "Lies from a drunk priest," Han shouted, trying to hold his composure. "If he's all that, let him prove it in the ring." Jian said nothing. He just looked at Lucia, and she understood. The tournament was hers, but the final fight would be his. That evening, Lucia went to the fig tree where he always meditated. "You're going to fight?" she asked. "Fight isn't the right word," he said softly. "I'm going to finish something I left undone years ago." She sat beside him. For the first time, he told her everything. "I was a master once. I had students. One of them was Han. He trained with rage, always in a hurry, said he wanted to surpass me. One day, he tried to kill me, said I kept him from being feared. I fought, I won, I ran." Silence. "Why didn't you face him again?" she asked quietly. "Because his anger was stronger than my calm," he said. "But now, maybe I've come back just in time." Lucia wept silently, not out of fear, but because she understood. The man beside her had already fought too many battles and might not survive the next. When morning came, Jian dressed simply, tied back his hair, fastened the leather bracelets around his wrists, and walked alone toward the plaza. Lucia followed close behind. The townsfolk parted to let them through. Han's disciples were already waiting in the ring, but all eyes in San Isidro were on one man, Huang Jian. The sun over San Isidro was already blazing when people started gathering around the makeshift ring in the center of the village. A black tarp stretched tight, ropes reinforced with duct tape, posters with Korean symbols plastered on the poles. Everything about it screamed that this day would be different. It was tournament day. But no one expected to see Huang Jian, the cripple, standing tall without his crutches, body steady, eyes calm, and a serenity so complete it almost felt insulting in the middle of all that tension. Beside him stood Lucia, her hands wrapped in cloth, the leather bracelets tight around her wrists, and a look that left no room for doubt. Their mere presence shifted the rhythm of the village. The townsfolk, once afraid to even peek outside, began stepping forward. First the children, then the elders, and finally the shopkeepers, still wearing their dirty aprons, but walking with eyes that no longer lowered. "They really came," muttered Esteban, the old boxer. "Maybe we actually stand a chance." Across the ring, Han Jinsu watched, jaw clenched tight. His disciples stood in perfect formation, soldiers waiting for orders. Felipe, Andres, and Yong were ready, but their confidence was cracking. They had expected a submissive crowd, not a whole village standing behind a girl and an old man who just yesterday slept under a bridge. The first match began, Felipe the Tiger versus Diego, the stonemason's son, a kid who'd been training secretly with Esteban. It lasted 2 minutes. Felipe won, but left with a split lip and wounded pride. The crowd gave Diego a standing ovation. Han frowned. Something in the air had shifted. The second fight brought Andres, the brute, against a retired soldier from the region. It was rougher, longer. Andres won again, but limped away furious. Then came the third fight. Lucia stepped into the ring. Her opponent, Yong, the deadliest of them all. A hush fell like a curtain. No one moved, no one breathed. The match started fast. Yong struck high, fast, precise, lethal. Lucia backed off, watching, reading. By the fifth exchange, she struck back, first dodging, then countering. Jian's style was alive within her. The fight went longer than any before. It ended with one strike. Lucia twisted her body, using Yong's momentum against him, and landed a perfect palm strike dead center in his chest. He hit the ground hard. The ring erupted. The entire village roared. Yong didn't get up. Lucia didn't celebrate. She just exhaled. Then Han rose from his seat. "No more games," he muttered, stepping into the ring. Silence swept through the crowd. The air itself felt heavy. Lucia turned toward Jian. He nodded once. "Now it's my turn." The Korean master climbed into the ring, but before he could begin, Father Tomas pushed through the crowd wearing his cassock, Bible in hand. "This isn't a tournament anymore," he declared. "It's a reckoning, and let the world see it. San Isidro is not afraid." Han shoved him aside without a word. Jian stepped forward. The two masters faced each other. The tension was electric. Around them, not a soul blinked. Felipe, Andres, and Yong stood silent. Lucia held her breath. Esteban's fists were clenched tight. "Today," Han growled, "you finish what you started." "Today," Jian replied, "I restore what you tried to destroy." The duel began. Even before the first strike, everyone knew. The fear was gone. The sunlight hit the ring squarely as the two masters finally stood face to face. Huang Jian, the crippled old man, now upright, shoulders squared, body calm as still water. Han Jinsu, hard-eyed, proud, and burning with rage. For one suspended heartbeat, time seemed to stop. Then Han lunged. The first kick came like lightning, a high spinning strike, pure taekwondo. Jian bent low, twisting aside, deflecting it with the back of his hand. No force, no rush, just movement. Fluid, natural, like water sliding over stone. The crowd gasped. Han didn't stop. He attacked with punches, low kicks, a relentless flurry. Jian didn't counter. He flowed, dodging, observing. Controlling the tempo. "Fight me for real, coward," Han roared, out of breath. Jian spun lightly and snapped a precise strike to his calf. Han stumbled. The villagers began to understand. Jian wasn't fighting to win. He was teaching. From outside the ring, Lucia watched every motion, her eyes wide. She didn't see a battle, she saw a lesson unfolding. Every gesture was a page in a living scripture. At one point, Han's kick landed, ribs cracking. Jian stepped back, coughing, nearly falling. For an instant, he looked fragile again. Then he straightened, breathed, stepped forward. His strength didn't come from force, it came from endurance. The silence began to break. First a whisper, then murmurs, then shouts. "Come on, master! San Isidro's with you! Show him who you are!" Han snarled, eyes burning. He'd built his life on dominance, on fear, on being untouchable. And now he was being dismantled by the man he'd once tried to erase. He threw his final attack, a spinning kick followed by a downward punch, but Jian caught him mid-motion, stopping it cold with a single open palm strike to the chest. Han dropped to his knees. The world went silent. Jian stepped closer, raised his hand, then lowered it. "Compassion is the final stage of strength," he said quietly, locking eyes with Han, "and you're still far from it." He turned and walked away, leaving Han kneeling, not beaten by pain, but by mercy. The village exploded in applause, shouts, and tears. And somewhere in that noise, something inside Lucia shifted too. In the days that followed, San Isidro changed. The Iron Dragon Academy packed up and left, not by order, but by shame. Han's remaining students scattered, some finding shelter with Esteban or Father Tomas, others simply disappearing. Lucia kept training, now out of choice, not fear. Not to defeat anyone, but to grow. Huang Jian, weary but peaceful, returned to his quiet life. He still slept under the bridge. Sometimes he'd accept soup, sometimes he'd vanish for days. But Lucia knew. He was still watching. "What will you do now?" she asked one afternoon. "Wait," he said with a faint smile, "for the next soul who needs me." "And me?" He touched her leather bracelets. "You already know how to fall and rise again. Now go teach others." That night, she climbed alone to the top of San Isidro's hill. The wind was soft. The church bells rang clear. And she understood. She was no longer just a student. She was the guardian of San Isidro. The weeks following the tournament were marked by an odd kind of peace in San Isidro. The streets were alive again. Children played. And even the church bell, silent for so long out of fear, rang once more, its echo rolling proudly through the hills. But the quiet that settled over the village wasn't an ending. It was the calm before something greater, because Hanjin Su hadn't left for good. He'd departed with his disciples, not in defeat, but in reorganization. Word spread through travelers. He was gathering forgotten masters, exiled students, practitioners of the most violent styles. He'd sworn to return, and this time it wouldn't be a tournament. It would be the final reckoning. Meanwhile, Lucia devoted herself completely to preparation. Her body had changed, faster, steadier, sharper, but her purpose had grown beyond fighting. She began teaching simple movements to children, balance lessons to the elders, reaction drills to young villagers who'd never even thrown a punch. Without realizing it, San Isidro was becoming a place that knew how to defend itself. Father Tomas opened the community hall for training. Esteban trained the older men. Even Doña Dolores, the shopkeeper, started carrying a wooden stick, just in case. Deep down, everyone knew. Han would return, and when he did, he wouldn't accept losing again. But no one expected Huang Jian to vanish. One Saturday morning, he simply didn't show up for training. Not by the bridge, not in the alleys, not beneath the old fig tree. Lucia searched for 3 days. Esteban combed the outskirts of the village. Nothing. Some said he'd left by choice. Others whispered that his enemies had found him. But Lucia knew he was preparing in his own way. Still, his absence hung heavy. Lucia began having strange dreams. Black water, leafless trees, church bells that never stopped ringing. And in every dream, The cripple stood with his back turned as if waiting for something. In the waking world, she had become the village's new pillar. But one question gnawed at her. Was she ready without him? On the Friday before rumors of a new attack, a black van with tinted windows was seen driving the old road. It didn't stop. It just circled the village. Slowly, a clear warning. The next morning, a note was found pinned to the fig tree where Jian used to sit. The dragon will return and burn everything the mantis built. When Lucia read it, she felt the weight of war creeping back toward them. She called everyone together, children, elders, merchants, farmers. She climbed the church steps and raised her voice. The man who protected us showed us the way. Now we either walk that path together or we let fear return. No one interrupted. No one looked away. The whole village stood. Lucia was no longer the apprentice. She was the shield. That night, meditating alone beside the fig tree, she heard a faint sound behind her. She turned. Huang Jian was there, thinner, sterner, but whole. "You came back," she said. He nodded. "I came to see if you truly don't need me anymore." Lucia drew a deep breath. "I'm not sure yet." He smiled. "Then we'll find out together." It was still dark when the rumble of engines echoed through the dry valleys surrounding San Isidro. Headlights carved through the black, slicing across the twisted trees at the edge of town. 4 black vans. More than 20 men poured out, armed with sticks, chains, black bands tied around their wrists. Behind them, a dark sedan with mirrored windows stopped in the middle of the plaza. From it stepped Han Jin-Su. This time, he wasn't dressed as a master. He was dressed for war. Combat pants, tight shirt, leather boots, a fresh scar across his face, and in his eyes, the same venom as before, now laced with something worse, personal hatred. The village woke in silence. No screams, no panic. They'd known this moment would come. But Han hadn't come for a match. He'd come for a message, to burn down everything Huang Jian and Lucia had rebuilt. From the top of the church steps, Lucia appeared first. No uniform, no armor. Just her wraps, her bracelets and eyes full of certainty. "There's nothing left here for you," she said. Han laughed. "Oh, there is, your pride and your master's corpse." The crowd parted. Huang Jian stepped forward, walking slowly, silent as ever, but standing straight, eyes sharp as blades. Han clenched his fists. "You should have died years ago." "Maybe," Jian said, "but I'm still here, and this time I'll finish it." Han barked an order in Korean. 6 men rushed at Jian. What followed wasn't a fight. It was a silent massacre. Kung Fu flowed through the old man like a river through stone. He dropped them one by one with surgical precision, using their weight against them, striking nerve points, ending each attack in no more than 2 moves. No wasted motion, no hesitation. Lucia, meanwhile, faced Felipe and Andres, 2 against 1. Felipe was fast, Andres was heavy, but Lucia was pure instinct. She dodged with grace, countered with purpose. Made Felipe stumble over his own kick, broke Andres' rhythm with a blow to the ribs. When they tried to flank her, she spun, elbow and heel, striking both at once. The villagers shouted, not in celebration, in release. And then Jian stepped toward Han. The final duel was beginning. "You've aged, Master," Han said, "and you've gone hollow," Jian replied. They didn't speak again. Han attacked with everything. High kicks, taekwondo strikes mixed with savage blows. Jian absorbed them, staggered, coughed blood, but refused to fall. Then something changed. He stopped retreating, locked eyes with Han, and stopped fighting like a master. He fought like a man with nothing left to lose. The strikes came from strange angles, low and unpredictable, movements ancient, nearly forgotten, from the southern mantis style. Han faltered. His technique was sharp but predictable. Jian's was alive. Han launched a spinning kick. Jin ducked, twisted, and struck the side of Han's knee with a single clean motion. Han dropped. The plaza fell silent. Jin stepped closer. He could have ended it there. Instead, he knelt, offered his hand, and said softly, "Compassion still lives here, but only if you choose to accept it." Han spat on the ground. "You win, old man, but you don't change me." Jian lowered his gaze. "I don't need to change you. I just needed to show this village that you were never the one in control." He stood, and for the first time, he turned his back on Han without fear. Lucia ran to him and threw her arms around his shoulders. He whispered, almost inaudibly, "It's over." The sun rose once again over San Isidro, lighter, gentler than it had in a long time. No more black vans patrolling the roads, no more suspicious glances on street corners. The plaza once again belonged to the people. Han Jin-su, defeated and humiliated, was carried away by his own disciples. Some were never seen again. Others returned months later, heads bowed, guilt heavy in their eyes. But on that ground where fear once ruled, something new had taken root. Respect and remembrance. Lucia had become, in the eyes of everyone, the village's new master. Not because of strength, not because of violence, but because she chose to stand when no one else believed they could. Many who had once lived in silence began to change. Esteban started training the younger ones more often. Father Tomas, more confident than ever, began turning the church into a small community center, a place for anyone who wanted to learn, to train, or simply to speak. Even Doña Dolores, who had once barely left her shop, now led a group of women practicing self-defense on Saturday mornings. The village breathed again, deeply, freely. As for Huang Jian, he didn't stay for the celebrations. Before dawn, on the day after the final battle, he left without saying goodbye. He only left behind a small wooden box, delivered to Lucia by a young boy at sunrise. Inside were his 2 bamboo crutches, restored, polished, whole again, and a note with 4 handwritten words, "The strength is yours now." Lucia didn't cry. She just smiled, because she understood. He was gone, yes, but he'd left behind what mattered most, the seed. Years later, children still played around the old ring in the center of San Isidro. Whenever one of them fell, the others would shout, "Get up like Lucia, she learned from the cripple." Near the old fig tree, a stone bench remained, always clean, always respected. Some said that on certain quiet nights, a shadow would appear there for just a moment. It would pause, lean slightly, and then disappear with the wind. And though few believed it, everyone knew deep down, Huang Jian never truly left. If this story touched you, share it with someone who needs to be reminded of the power of resilience. San Isidro may be fictional, but fear, courage, and the act of rising again when the world thinks you're finished, those are real. Maybe you know someone like Lucia. Maybe you've been the cripple yourself. If you have, stand up again. And if you've never fallen, be ready to help the one who has. True strength doesn't shout, it waits. And now, it's yours.